Say Something. It's like a podcast, but it's a vodcast, so you can listen and watch. It's like news talk or sports talk, but it's life talk, so we can walk the road together. On today's show, Sally Lloyd-Jones, New York Times bestselling author, chats with us about gifting, purpose, and hope.
I think sometimes it's all about God's timing, and in His timing, you don't miss out. And He can give in a year what you could have taken 10 in your own strength trying to do.
Right.
Thanks for joining the conversation. Here we go.
Really are carpooling, so we're
really
gonna go
are bringing a child home from school.
Yeah, we're gonna drop Ella off. So one thing that Sally's in Dallas.
Yeah.
I'm in Dallas.
To meet some friends here, but also to talk about this, which is her new book.
Sally Lloyd-Jones is a New York Times bestselling author of the Jesus Storybook Bible, Thoughts to Make Your Heart Sing, and her latest, Goldfish on Vacation, a completely true made-up story. She can be found at sallylloydjones.com, as well as on Facebook and Instagram.
And it is so good. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
And I'm passing it back to you to take a peek.
Yay.
Because when I heard you read that the other day, I really did, and I told you this, that it made me think of Blueberries for Sal. I like it as much as any of the Virginia Lee Burton books, which we have read over and over and over. And
Wow, that's
it just
a huge compliment.
has that great feel. So I hope you keep
Getting one of these too.
keep going on those, because it's so good. But tell us a little bit about this book and kind of, what's taken you into this world of beautiful storytelling that reaches not only children but adults.
Oh, well, that's my favorite children's books are the ones that you can love as an adult, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And that's I'm going to butcher the quote, but of course C.S. Lewis said there's no such thing as a children's book that's only good for children. But he said it better. But I really believe that. But anyway, this book, as I like to say to children, is a completely true made-up story. And I was reading just with you the other day at a lovely tea that we had, a mother-daughter tea.
Similar to the lovely experience in this car.
Very similar.
We have mothers,
with the
daughters,
dirty socks.
and tea.
We
That's
had
right.
dirty socks, sort of plastic, horrid, nasty things that we're drinking out of. It was all very similar to that, yes. Except they had silver trays.
Yes.
And they had juice packs on silver trays for the children. I thought that was fantastic. Anyway, I did a reading and I said to the children, this is a completely true made-up story. And then this very intelligent child said, oh, so you mean it's historical fiction?
Wow.
And I thought, wow, she's clever, isn't she?
Yeah. And a reader.
Yeah. But I call it completely true made up because historical fiction sounds, if I say that, it doesn't sound so good.
No, and it sounds...
Who wants to read that
just
if I
the
say
teensy
that?
bit boring.
Or a tiny bit scary.
A little bit.
Anyway, and I probably wouldn't know how to write that. That sounds like something you don't know how to write, but I know how to make a completely made up true story.
Yes.
This story really happened in New York, and it happened about 10 years ago, and there was this fountain right near where I live with a beautiful eagle on it. It was made by the same people who did Grand Central. I can't quite remember the name of the architects.
That's amazing.
It's marble. It's beautiful pink marble. But it was run down, had graffiti, it had ivy all growing in it, and they used it like a garbage pit. And then it was kind of sad to see it. And then one summer, this young guy, no one asked him to do it, no one paid him to do it, just decided he was going to clean it. So he got rid of the ivy, cleared up the garbage, cleaned off the graffiti, and filled the basin of the fountain with clear water, and put in lily pads and papyrus and reeds. And then he put up a sign that said, and this is when I was like, he said, coming in 2 weeks, Goldfish looking for a summer home.
I mean, that's so clever.
And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And then 2 weeks later, sure enough, all the children in the neighborhood, all the Goldfish children, all the Goldfish parents brought their goldfish and put them in the fountain, in the basin, because it's quite big, dropped them off and visited them all through the summer, and then picked them up at the end of the summer holidays.
Oh my goodness.
So people brought their own goldfish.
Yes, and they went on vacation. And
That's
it was all the children.
awesome.
And so, but of course the question we all have is, how do you know you got your goldfish?
And
that's addressed in the book. But there was something about that story that first of all moved me. And I have learnt if it moves me, I need to pay attention.
Yeah,
and then
right.
the other thing about it was, I thought that's such a picture of how there's something of God in that. There's something beautiful and redemptive. It's such a picture of when we might be all run down and broken and filled with garbage, but like that man, he saw something. He saw the beauty beneath all of that, and that's how God, he knows us, and he knows we're beautiful, even though we might have things wrong and we might not be our best, and he's like that man. So there was something in it that just made me want to write it.
So beautiful.
And the made up bit is that I took my lovely nieces and nephews and made them live in New York. Wishful thinking, they don't, they live in London, but made them live in New York, and they were the children that the story's about. So that's the made up bit. So you see, it is a made up, completely true story.
It is.
I love it.
And it's beautiful, and the illustration is just fantastic.
And I can't say enough about the illustration, because
Really
a picture
is
book,
beautiful.
it's a story told in 2 languages. And when they're both
Here's
working,
the fountain.
see, there's the lovely fountain and the lovely.
Oh, I love that. It's just so good. Yeah, which is amazing that the illustrator did that. And
I sent him pictures of the fountain. I never sent him pictures of my nieces and nephews, but they look exactly like my nieces and nephews.
Do they really?
I
And
love that.
I gave it to them just about 2 weeks ago when I was in England, and it probably was the first time because I write books and they've grown too much. You know, it's like C.S. Lewis said in the Chronicles of Narnia to Lucy, you're too big now to like fairy tales. Maybe one day you'll grow up enough to like them back again. Because by the time he'd finished it, she was too old for the story, and often that happens. But this book, they loved, so it was exactly the right age for them.
oh, that's so
Even though
perfect.
they're not little, but I think a picture book can last. Well, I still like.
Well, it's clever, and I laughed at it. And
Well, I like that.
I know, and very genuinely, because
Yes,
I thought
you-
it was very funny.
Well, it was lovely to have you.
So tell us a little bit about what got you started into writing. Like, what compelled you? I would love to know, because we talked a little bit, but just about your giftedness. I think that people can kind of downplay their purpose and giftedness in life and avoid or not embrace it. And I love to hear how you found that in yourself and how you landed there.
Yeah, I always loved writing, but I didn't land on children's books until quite late. And I also, as I'm sure all of us, especially women, we tend to have so much self-doubt and self-questioning. At least I did.
Yes.
And as a little girl, I thought, I want to be a writer, but I'm not good enough. And I grew up thinking that. So it was a funny mix of having a really big dream that I believed in, but at the same time, I kept saying, yeah, but I'm not good enough. So it's that funny, I think you can have both, can't you?
Yeah.
And I now look at that as you're in your own way. And my job now...
Oh, I love that. You're in your own way. Like, get out of the way.
And
What
I
helped
think,
you get over that?
it was long. I ended up working in publishing, so I was on the wrong side of the desk. I was working on other people's writing, not mine. But God's master plan was training me. I became an art director, which is hugely important in my work. The fact that I'm visual and I understand design
Yes.
is huge. I had to have that skill. But also, what started to happen was I worked for a packager, which is they don't do them so much now, but back then, in the time of dinosaurs,
Yes. I think I remember those times
they used
where
to,
there was a cord on a phone.
Yes.
Those days. Yes.
and they used to hire someone called a packager. A publisher would hire a packager to do books that did anything weird, like if they had flaps or they
or like a
squeaked,
pop-up or
anything
something
like that.
Yeah.
They'd hire a packager, and I worked for a packager. And the great thing about that was you had a sort of magazine publishing type of schedule. It was really fast, and they never had money to pay an author, so you as the editor had to come up with the ideas, and you usually had to come up with 4 titles in the series of a flat book series, right? Because that would make lots more money if you had 4 books.
Right.
And then you had to come up with the stories to go in those 4 books. So I ended up writing the stories without realizing I was writing. I was just doing it as part of my job.
Wow.
So that was lovely of the
Wow.
Lord to kind of make that
Isn't that
happen.
amazing?
And then my nephew was born, and I thought, suddenly, instead of thinking, oh, I should sound like these children's book writer, I should sound like a children's book writer, which is terrifying, because what is that? You know, you're going to think, well, I'm supposed to be like C.S. Lewis, or I'm supposed to be like, Winnie the Pooh,
Right.
A.A. Milne. And then a publisher said to me, because I had come up with an idea for a book, but I was intimidated to write it. Because I felt like if I write it, I'm going to find out I can't write. That was my dread, was if I'm really not going to be able to do even though I'd done these little stories for the packager, they weren't literary, and my dream was to write picture books. Because those, to me, they're poetry and they're just beautiful. And so he said to me, well, you don't have to write it, we could get someone else. And I said, oh, no, I can't. I knew that wasn't right.
Right.
And I think he saw the terror in my face and he said, well, just write what makes you laugh. You're very funny. And I went, well, I know what makes me laugh. And from that moment, I just thought, oh, well, I'm just going to write. Am I allowed? I almost felt, am I allowed to just write what makes me laugh? And I started doing that, and it freed me. And I think I found my voice because I stopped trying to be a children's book writer. I just did what came normally. And I think the other thing is, the thing that comes naturally, we don't value.
Right.
So
That's
true.
so true.
Especially as women, I think. Don't you think?
Absolutely.
I think a lot of times not only not value it, but a lot of times not even see it. It takes others acknowledging
invisible.
it
Yes.
in us.
And I love how the Lord so gently prepared you for it without you even knowing.
That's where I like to tell the story, because it hopefully it will encourage someone in that position to realize, if God's given you a gift, he's gonna make everything work together to get you to the point where you do what he wants you to do. And for me, I mean, the story of why I wrote the Jesus Storybook Bible, I never set out to write a Bible, because I thought, I mean, I'm a Christian, I've been brought up in the Christian world. That wasn't my priority. I thought, I want to reach all children with very good stories, and they just want to bring them joy. That I felt was my calling. So I didn't have a big enough vision to think that I could write a Bible that could reach children who would never come to church.
Right.
So I wasn't interested, but I needed money. I had lost my job in massive, layoffs. I had an apartment in New York, and God saw fit to make the circumstances so tight that I really had to say yes. And without knowing what I was I didn't have the vision yet, but he got me right where I needed to be. And so I took a contract to write an older Bible storybook. And it was only halfway through researching it that I went from, I'm doing this, it's going to be good, but really I'm going to finish it, get the money, and move on to what I'm really supposed to be doing. I would have said that one day, but the next day something happened, and I really believe it was God just set my imagination on fire. And I then would have said, wait, if I give this everything, this could be amazing. And at that point I was thinking, well, what would C.S. Lewis do with something like this?
Really?
And it took the bar into a place where I felt I was just on fire with, and then I didn't care. It was nothing about money. It was about, I just want to do this and really convey what I really believe. And so that wasn't any of my plan. That was God making the circumstances that I had to do this. And then he gave me the gift of the book. And I was available because he got me in that right place. So I think that's good to tell for anyone who might be stuck, to realize it's not all up to you. Just, do the next right thing.
Yeah, and that the road to get there, how many years was that? It wasn't like an instant thing.
I loved writing since I was very tiny. I didn't publish my first book till I was over 40.
Really? It's great.
But you see, the other part of that is I probably, you'd think, it'd be much better to have started at 20. I could have done so much more, but I actually don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I think sometimes it's all about God's timing, and in his timing, you don't miss out. And he can give in a year what you could have taken 10 in your own strength trying to do.
Right, and that's good. Did you publish books before the Jesus Storybook Bible, or was that?
Yeah, my first book was the one that the publisher said, write what makes you laugh. It's called Handbag Friends.
Handbag Friends.
And it looks like a pink handbag.
I love that.
But it's an adventure storybook. It's 64 pages, 3 episodes, got a monster, a song. It's the most crazy, out there, joyful story, and it's one of my favorites.
Is it? I was about to say, do you still love it?
I love it, and it's probably the best thing I can read to children. And I used to go
and that was your first one.
Yes. And the lovely thing was, when I sent the manuscript in, which was a big hurdle because I didn't know what the publisher was going to say, and he was the one who said, write what makes you laugh. he didn't say, oh, I love the story, or I love this and this. He said the best thing I could possibly have heard, which was, I love the voice. And you don't want, and that was sort of like God's kindness, because he was telling me something that I needed to know and get out. And this goes back, sorry, that was a very long way around to get back to, I needed to get out of the way and let the story through. So with Handbag Friends, once I said I need to write what makes me laugh, I would show up at my computer, I'd say, God, I can't do this unless you help me. And then my job was to get out of the way, open up my computer and listen to the characters and what were they telling me and what was happening, and stop thinking about myself. Because if I'm thinking, am I a good writer, then I've completely silenced the story, haven't I? I don't ask that, I ask, am I telling a good story? Because then, instead of it being selfish, am I a good writer? And I'm going to prove it. You go to, am I telling a good story?
Wow.
And then you're thinking of the child, and it's all generosity.
That is phenomenal, and certainly plays with writing and the audience, but with anything you do. Anything.
I love that. I think it's really true of everything.
I do too. It's
right?
so
It's
true.
right? Love God, love others, and you're taking your eyes off of yourself and putting them on somebody else.
Well, and the other is so crippling.
Spur them on, and
it is crippling.
Yes, you can't. It leaves you stuck, and then it's miserable. It's like misery, and that.
Well, what is that? Sin is curved inwardness. Is that Augustine? Someone said that.
I think it is Augustine. And yes,
we're amazing with our quotes, aren't we? Really.
Listen, you're doing a great job.
But I might be making it up.
I can't remember. I was going to ask you, and we talked yesterday, just like about what would be the 5 tips for the Sally Lloyd-Jones, just things for joyful and peaceful living. And I feel like you've been like doling them our way, and so
we get out of the way and let the story through.
Yes.
In whatever you're doing. And if that's the story of God's love, if it's the story of your life, whatever is the story, or if it's the story of you're a parent and you're raising your children, get out of the way and let what's happening and what God's doing through you, just let it be, because he's the one in charge. Well, because, when you look at your own childhood and your own upbringing, we all know none of us had perfect anything.
No.
We want to protect children, but sometimes we have to think, it's more important that we equip them. We can't stop life happening to them, even though that's what we want as older, if we're aunts or grandparents or parents.
Yeah.
But the truth is, in our lives, we know it's the time of suffering. That's when everything changes.
Yes,
it does. Suffering strengthens, makes you stronger.
But it's hard as parents and people.
It is. I think it's hard for anyone you love. I think it's hard to watch anyone you love go through hardship. I really do.
I once was praying for my nieces and nephews that are going through a really hard time, and I felt God saying, I'm the rescuer, not you.
Oh, I love that.
And this is
so true.
This is the result of, the fall. Things aren't perfect, but he's the one writing the story of our children's lives, not us.
Yes.
And he has it in hand, and when everything looks dreadful, we have to keep declaring the fact that he is writing the story, not us. And he is only up to great and good things. I think I might get out of the way, trust your voice.
Yes.
One thing that I'm learning is to stand up, to not stay small so you can be safe, but to stand into what God's called you.
That's really good.
Because I've always wanted to stay small, to stay safe.
Right.
And sometimes, there's that tall poppy syndrome they have in Australia, which is, who do you think you are? Anyone who's too successful or whatever, fill in the blank. You want to cut them down to size. It's not something that's American, I don't think.
I don't think so either. Or maybe not outwardly.
Do you ever have that thing in your head, though, that says, who do you think you are?
Sure.
Yeah, so that's sort of it, which I think is a horrible...
I think everybody does that.
Well,
I think it's that questioning that you talked about earlier.
To me, to write a version of the Bible, that to me is very brave. I mean, it's the most published book on earth.
Yeah.
And yet you managed to take a very fresh and meaningful approach to it that resonates loudly. And really, I mean, it's really compelling in all the right ways. I mean, we read through it multiple times, but to me, to take the most published book on the planet,
very foolish and
right?
brash.
I mean, that is brave, but look at what became of it.
But that's maybe that would be another thing I'd say. If you're in, like, I got to the point with that book where I realized exactly what you're saying. I'm like, what on earth am I doing? How am I going to do this? And then awful thoughts would come in, like, Brennan Manning would do a much better job of this. Well, it was all made up, and how do you even? And then I thought, I got to the point, and I'd go, and I have a great friend who says, I say, all we can do is pray, and she goes, has it come to that? But I got to that ridiculous point where you actually suddenly get to the real place, and I would say I'd sit in front of my computer overwhelmed at what I was doing and thinking about those verses that said don't jot and tittle and don't mess with these words, all that.
Right, those.
Yeah, and I would sit there and say, okay, God, you got me into this mess. I have to write this book. So unless you do it, it won't get done. So you better do it. And then I would, almost not angry, but desperate, I'd say that, and then I'd start writing.
Mm-hmm.
But why did it take me so long to get there? And why don't I always start there? And it started to make me think I need to be there in all of my writing, because it's true of everything. Unless God does it, it won't get done.
Right.
And then something about saying that prayer in that attitude gave me confidence to think, so I've prayed that, I'm in this mess, I've got to finish this book, which is impossible, so God, you have to do it. And then start writing.
Sure.
And that's the adventure, and that's true of our lives, isn't it?
I think which is exactly what you said even about your own life, that you started thinking, oh, I love writing, and then you're in this job you couldn't have orchestrated it to be what it is. And someone might look at you and go, oh my gosh, she's a New York Times best-selling author, and your book is in how many languages? 35, and go, well, good for you. Good for her. It worked for her, but what about me?
I know.
And the truth is, it was working for you even when there wasn't one book sold.
And every day that I sit down to write, I battle the same. I still have to get out of my own way. Yeah, people don't believe that, and I'm sure you have the same. They don't really believe, like, wait a minute, you did it, so of course you can do it. But you talk to any writer, and they will, even people who, preachers, they'll say, I'm only as good as my latest sermon.
Or I think it doesn't matter who. You could talk to a carpenter or an architect and go, oh, that house was so beautiful, but
they're
that
onto the next.
I know, which is like, quit beating ourselves up.
I know.
Stop it.
And maybe it's thanking the Lord that He's the one at work. Also, I think this would be another tip, would be make sure what you're calling success is what God calls success.
Yes.
So my danger and as a writer, your danger is to look at all the wrong signals, which are how many books have I sold, how many bestseller lists am I on, and obviously those are important, but the true thing is you have to remember why you got in it in the first place. You didn't get in it to make money or get on sales lists. You wrote because it was something in your heart.
Yeah.
And a really wise mentor of mine said, and this is true for anything, find the place in what you do, a picture or some event that you can go back to and you can say, that's why I'm doing what I do. And for me, when he told me that, immediately I was in a public school in Brooklyn, in one of the most troubled neighborhoods. I used to go in and read to the children. I'd read to the really little ones, but they were from drug addicted parents, so they were 4 technically, but really they're more like 3. And some of them would hang back and look really troubled. And I'd go in and I'd read Handbag Friends, and they were 3, 4, 5. They'd sit through the whole book, 64 pages. That's not a short book.
No.
Join in with the monster song, have so much fun, and every single time when I finished the story, they would run to me and give me a group hug. And I knew Jesus is in the center of that hug, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And when I start getting miserable because I'm comparing, I try to remember, what better thing would it be to change a child's life than to get on the bestseller list? We all know it, don't we? But we have to remind ourselves. So I encourage everyone, find that picture that you can go back to. It's almost like a snapshot you can have ready, because you know you're going to doubt it. Do you have that for yourselves?
Well, I just am going to linger in that for a minute, because that's so beautiful. That's just really beautiful.
And one time they said, we had question and answers, which we don't really do with the tiny tots, but we did. And this little girl went, and I went, yeah? Any questions? She went, I went, yeah? She went, I love you. So how could I ever question that that's the best possible reason to be doing? And it's such a reward in itself, isn't
Sure.
it? And it's so much more meaningful than the bestseller list. And the other thing I always think is, well, people on the bestseller, this is my story and I'm sticking to it. People on the bestseller list 100 years ago, do we even remember who they are?
Right.
No.
So why do we think that's the judge of everything? I don't really understand it. But anyway, I love saying that, because then you can't really keep saying it, because it sounds like sour grapes, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. It's just the perspective. And I think perspective is critically important, because you can do that in your own life and go, what was so important when I was a junior in high school? Well, it was just getting asked to that dance, and that made it all, or whatever it was. And now I'm like, well, that was the most ridiculous thing. How much time do you waste thinking about that? And it's like, no, don't waste the precious moments of today on things like that misinform, but rather focus on the truth. And wow, Sally, thank you so much for spending time with us, because that was just chock full of I can't wait to linger in it and keep thinking about it.
I didn't get to hear any of yours though, so I have to.
No, this is about you.
Oh,
that's right.
All right, let's show the book.
It's all about me.
Yes.
No.
There you go.
You and the goldfish.
That might
be on vacation.
That might be the last thing, that it's not about us.
It is not.
Amen.
And that part of this bigger, more amazing story. And I mean, one thing I'd love to say is that when Londoners were asked, they'd lived through the Blitz.
Right.
And many years later, people were asked, what was the happiest time of your life? They all said, during the time of the Blitz, which is completely mad. It was awful. People were getting bombed. And when they were asked why, they said, because we were pulling together when we were part of a greater story.
Yes.
And if we feel like what we're doing is part of God's greater story, it's not about our little story and getting on the bestseller list and whatever our thing is.
Right.
But if we're deployed where God's put us to do what only we can do, then that's much less crazy making, isn't it? Because you just do that, you focus on that, and God has other people. I love meeting people who are in film or wherever they are, or mums. I mean, teachers, people who have such influence, and if they're doing what they do excellently, we won't know till heaven the ramifications, because we know in our own lives, don't we?
Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
And that's enough of me.
I feel like giving you
I'm not sure we could get enough of you, actually.
I can totally get it.
Thanks again for joining the conversation. We love hanging out with you guys. Want to stay connected? Like or follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or follow us on Instagram. See you next time on Say Something.